5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I have a vague memory of being a little kid and going to the bookshelf, and there must have been a set of books that resembled a set of encyclopedias, but instead of being encyclopedias as you know them or remember them, because we don't really have them anymore, I guess, they were World War II books that my father had purchased at one point. He himself was a veteran of World War II. So was the father of our next guest, and he wanted to write about his father, and in doing so uncovered a story that you are going to drop your jaw on. I don't even know a better way to say this one. Frederic H. Martini is on the phone. He has been a member of the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society for over 25 years. He's the lead author of 10 undergraduate textbooks, 2 atlases, and 5 clinical manuals in the fields of anatomy and psychology. He wrote the book Betrayed: Secrecy, Lies, and Consequences. It details his father's experiences as an airman, and a prisoner of war during World War II, and his treatment after he returned to the United States. Some of the story of World War II never was told correctly, honestly, accurately. I don't know how to say that, but based on the book Betrayed, that's where I'm getting that information from. So let's say hello to the author, Frederic H. Martini. Good morning, Frederic.
Good morning, Larry. How are you this morning?
I'm okay. Thank you for being on the air with us.
Sure.
Is your father still with us?
No. He died in 1995.
So, and where are you? Where are you calling from?
Well, right now I'm in New Zealand.
Oh my.
Wow. Wow, you have such a great signal.
I know, it's wonderful.
You're not too far from Vietnam. The last guest was from Vietnam, and I had a hard time hearing it. Maybe it was just understanding, or maybe that was the problem. Wow. So tell me, where did you grow up?
Grew up in the New Jersey area, and then my parents moved up to New Hampshire when I got out of high school.
So this is why I understand you. This is why. Okay.
Then they retired to Bradenton. So.
Oh, there you go.
We have a big triangle. Wow. So tell me, you started writing about your... I mean, it looks like all the other work you've done, the undergraduate textbooks, etc., sound completely different than this.
Yes. This was something that was always on my list of things that I felt I needed to do. But it wasn't until I started to get far enough along that I could involve co-authors with my other books that I could free up the time to really focus on this. And even with focus, it still took 7 years of digging and snooping around to get the materials together.
Was your father alive as you wrote the book?
No.
Oh, okay.
He had died. What finally drop kicked me into getting it going was when we were moving my mother into assisted living, and I was going through her stuff and found boxes of records and correspondence, and that gave me a solid base to start making something theoretical actual. So I started there.
Okay, so was this intended to be fiction, and then it turned out to be fact, or nonfiction? No. Okay.
No, it was always intended to be his story.
Okay.
But and then I wanted to stick as close to what I could actually document as possible.
So in doing the research, did you discover some horrible things that happened to your dad that he never shared with you?
Well, I had gotten bits and pieces of terrible things from him that would kind of pop out, or that I overheard when he was talking to one of my uncles or somebody else who'd been in the war. And then I was able to go into some records, and once I got into the depositions of the airmen that were collected in between, say, 1945 and 1947, then I was able to get additional events that I could put into a sequence that made sense and was consistent across all the different reports.
What we had learned about your book, that your dad and the other soldiers were told that they weren't really there at the Buchenwald concentration camp, that they were lying.
Yeah, they had been shot down. There were 168 of these airmen. They'd been shot down, collected by the Gestapo over a period, during 1944, the first 6 or 7 months of 1944, and sentenced to death and shipped by boxcar to Buchenwald. And they were in Buchenwald for 9 weeks, and over that period they were starved and beaten and experimented on, and after the war, when they came home, they were basically told that they were delusional and that there had been no POWs in Buchenwald.
And how about Wernher von Braun? How did he interact with your dad?
Well, he was, his story, which I decided to parallel in the book with my dad's, his story intersects with my dad's at Buchenwald because von Braun was in charge of the technical aspects of rocket and missile design for the Third Reich, and he acquired tens of thousands of slave laborers from Buchenwald, and my father was certain that he'd seen him at Buchenwald, and there are records of von Braun at Buchenwald a few weeks before the airmen arrived in Buchenwald. So it's certainly possible that he did see him.
Right.
But because... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but this is what I wanted to say. We were told, we Americans were told, that American prisoners of war never were sent to concentration camps, and this is completely... This makes us wonder or realize, we probably always wondered how could that be true when these were not trustworthy people. So, I mean, you're just kind of confirming what a lot of people must have suspected.
Yeah, at that point in the war, if you were a downed airman and you were picked up by the German army or by the Luftwaffe, you would end up in a Luftwaffe POW camp, where conditions were harsh but not extremely brutal.
No experiments.
To the point of, yeah. But if you were picked up by the Gestapo, there were standing orders to get rid of you, and that's what they did. And these 168 airmen were unfortunate enough to be collected.
And they were experimented on. Can you help us understand what those experiments?
Well, it was never really clear. They received injections in the heart, and there's never been, I suspect the records were all burned by the Germans, but it's never been known what it was. Was it an experimental vaccine? Because typhus was rampant in the camp, but there's no indication that they were particularly concerned about the welfare of the residents of the camp. But it's just not known. They received 2 injections in the heart a couple weeks apart.
Wow. Do the families of the other men know about this, and have they been... Does your book blow this open for those people who might be related to those other men?
Well, its function is to try to get people to see the whole picture here, because the the families of many of the airmen who I've contacted, their dads and granddads went through basically the same thing my father did, and because von Braun was brought to the U.S. and his wartime activities hidden, and a fabricated history created for him, all of the records from Buchenwald and the records of these airmen were classified and buried and unavailable to everybody, to other government agencies as well as to the airmen themselves. So when my dad tried to get the VA assistance for some of the problems resulting after he got back, he was told that it hadn't happened, and that the attitude was that he was either delusional or he was trying to be a grifter and get benefits from the VA that he didn't deserve.
Yeah, I bet that happened. You know, we were doing a radio show when my father was still alive, and we were talking, and you know, my dad never spoke about the war, and he called in to tell us that he had witnessed a jet go over, a fighter jet that was a German fighter jet. And in World War II, there technically or supposedly were no jets. And he said that the people he reported it to said you must have what they call it, battle fatigue.
Yes.
Back in those days. Yeah, and it turns out that they did have jets. So it's weird how you know, soldiers, especially if there's more than one telling you the same story, the soldiers who were reporting to the VA that they went through this then were turned away and were not given the benefits. It was really a small amount of money, wasn't it?
Oh, sure. And it was for things, I mean, my dad got a letter that said his flak injuries were not service related.
Oh my.
But because all the records were classified, there was no way for the individual airman to network and become aware that somebody who lived only, you know, a short ways away was having the same problems they were having.
Yeah.
If they'd been able to network, they might have been able to get some leverage.
And the powers that be in the United States Army really did a disservice to our own soldiers, because you pointed out that the U.S. Army employed von Braun.
Employed him, paid him what was at the time an enormous salary, equivalent to $120,000 a year, something like that in today's dollars. Brought him to the U.S. He ended up becoming a national hero of the U.S. as much as he'd been a national hero of the Third Reich, and all that was done while people, you know, returning airmen had been told they were crazy.
Yeah.
Do you think that there are still cover-ups today throughout our military?
I mean, it's common. I'm sure there are always secrets, and there are always factors to balance, and sometimes they get the balance wrong, I think. I mean, there was a comment at one point that the problem wasn't Nazis in the past, it was communists in the future. That was the attitude in the late 40s, early 50s, and so they just decided to charge ahead. And once they'd invested a huge infrastructure in these rocket engineers that they brought to the U.S., then they could not very well say, oh yeah, by the way, they'd been involved in slave labor and half the slave laborers died, and you know, that would not be very good PR and not good for anybody's careers. So
how long was your father actually in prison?
He was shot down on June 12th. He was picked up by the Gestapo on August 5th, and he was liberated April 29th.
Okay.
My.
And was he with the other soldiers that are mentioned in the book?
He was with them through the liberation of Stalag, not the liberation, but the evacuation of Stalag Luft 3. But he was separated at that point because he was an enlisted man, a staff sergeant. And by the way the Geneva Conventions were structured, after the Luftwaffe got them out of Buchenwald within a few days of when they were sentenced to be executed.
Oh my.
And when they got them to a Luftwaffe camp, then the officers and the enlisted were split up, and they didn't have much intersection again until occasional interactions later on.
One of the you have 100% 5-star reviews, by the way, on Amazon, and one of them sounds like he's from a friend of yours, R.O. Are you familiar with this review?
No.
R.O. says, I suppose he's talking about you. He says, I have sailed thousands of miles with the author.
Yep.
Do you know who that is?
Yep.
And had no idea he was carrying such a burdensome story. As I read about his dad, I had to stop frequently and let the horror of it all sink in. I could remember vividly the photos released after the prison camps were repatriated at the end of World War II, piles of contorted corpses, and those able to walk nearly dead. I never thought such a horror would be shared by anyone I knew. I kept thinking of how I would feel if it was my father I was reading about. That's what I wondered, actually. Did you discover this after your father died, and did it crush you to know what your father had gone through?
No, I knew from the time I was a kid. I mean, my dad had terrible nightmares. He had rages. You didn't want to talk to your father about the war. You didn't want to get your father mad. So of course I was very interested in what was going on.
Right,
so I tried to overhear everything I could. And so what I really found when I did this work was that I was not aware of the degree of frustration he faced trying to get the Veterans Administration and the government to say, you're not a liar. I think more than the financial burdens of his medical problems, it was the fact that they weren't believing him. And that really got him. And then they tried to get the Buchenwald Airmen tried to get a resolution passed through Congress that simply said these guys weren't lying. They were actually there, and congratulations to them for having survived. And it got introduced 3 times and never passed. So
and now it's too late for all of them. I mean, unless there's a few left, I don't know. But it seems like the World War II generation is just about gone. Yeah,
I only know maybe 3 still alive.
Yeah.
There may be others, but I haven't been able to find them. But it would still be a good thing to correct the official record.
Absolutely.
Just so that we don't, because now there's a congressional report that says there were no POWs in concentration camps. And in the Buchenwald war crimes trial, the prosecutors couldn't come up with the name of any POWs, even though out of the 168, 2 of them died there, and their names, and none of that was available to the prosecutors.
Well, one name we know is your dad, right?
Yep. But
wow. Robin, just a little side note here. Robin and I play music when we don't do a radio show, and we play nursing homes. So we're not Mick Jagger. We're like two old people that play music.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the songs we play is Lily Marlene. And we've been doing this for a long time. And the only reason I bring it up is to share with you the dwindling World War II population. In the beginning, when we started doing this, which was maybe 15 years ago, whenever we did Lily Marlene, you could always pick out the men who had served in World War II, because these strong men would be crying. Just that one, for whatever it is, that song just hit them hard. Now, if we go and play anywhere, nobody even has a reaction to it. There is nobody left who really... For some reason, that song, for those World War II American veterans, I don't know what happened, but that for some reason always triggers the tears. Like I said, not anymore, because they're not there anymore, the guys.
Yeah. My uncle just passed away. He was 93, and he was 18 when he was dropped into the Battle of the Bulge, right? A few days before it started, and he went through his own experiences.
Did your father or did any of the other information shed some light as to their mental? I don't want to say tricks. Like you always hear when people are in horrible conditions, they think of something that's nice so that they can not be there mentally. Was there anything like that?
Well, what saved, as far as I can determine, what saved these guys in Buchenwald was that they were military and they formed a unit. Within a day, they had a chain of command. They knew the senior officer. He had seconds in command. The men were divided into squads. Each squad was an air crew in case they were able to break out and steal a plane. And they went everywhere inside the camp marching. And so they had an immediate esprit de corps. And I think that buffered them. If they had just become part of the general Buchenwald population in Little Camp, I don't think any of them would have made it.
Wow.
And it's just amazing, all of the research that you had to do through not just in the United States documents, but records from Germany and France as well. That must have been very difficult.
Orchestrating it all, but I was able to make contact with groups through websites and then locate translators and have archivists go in and photograph, and so I was able to accumulate the material. It was just step by step, and of course every time you find something, it leads you towards something else. But after 7 years, I said, I got to stop.
Oh my gosh!
I'm kidding. Wow. I'm getting too old to just drag this on forever. So,
so your dad, you're named after your dad. You're a junior.
No, I have a different middle name, and
okay.
my son is named after my dad, and he has a different middle name from me. But that's how.
I want to read just for the listeners so they get if you don't already have a grasp of what this is about. The book is called Betrayed. On Amazon, I want to read one paragraph from the descriptive. It says, the author didn't intend to write a book about a massive government cover-up. He simply wanted to honor his father, Frederic C. Martini, an American airman who was shot down over occupied France in World War II and then imprisoned in Buchenwald concentration camp. Over 7 years of research, an even darker picture emerged that an unconstrained military intelligence operation disrupted the lives of American ex-POWs. I have a copy of the book, Betrayed. If you would like it, give me a call. I'll leave it here for you. I did find it on Amazon. Rick, do you have a website you want to recommend?
I have a website, www.fredericmartini.com. It's got one section devoted to Betrayed, and there are hundreds of additional photographs and downloadable segments on the B-17s and the structure at Buchenwald and a bunch of other things that World War II fanciers might find of interest.
Wow, what a very interesting interview. Frederic, Martini, thank you so much for being on the air with us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
We'll be right back. Here's a quick look at yesterday's election results. Republican Ron DeSantis will be Florida's next governor in a close race with Andrew Gillum. Rick Scott will be Florida's next U.S. Senator after unseating longtime Senator Bill Nelson. In the Marion County School Board race, Kelly King will keep her seat, Nancy Thrower will replace Angie Boynton, and Eric Cummings will replace Bobby James. Regarding the 12 amendments, 11 of them passed and 1 failed. The failed amendment was Amendment 1, which would have increased homestead property tax exemptions. In the District 8 state Senate race, Keith Perry held on to his position, as did Dennis Baxley in the District 12 race. In the 3 congressional races, Ted Yoho, Neil Dunn, and Daniel Webster all defeated their opponents. And Republicans Charlie Stone, Stan McClain, and Brett Haig all won their races for state representative. Finally, Kathy Bryant and Carl Zalak will both retain their seats on the Marion County Commission. 64.28% of registered voters in Marion County showed up to vote. And that is your news brief from The Source.
Wednesday will remain warm and humid with times of sun and clouds at a high of 83 at the coast to 87 inland. Partly cloudy on Wednesday night, lows 65 inland, 69 at the coast. Thursday, warm with clouds and sun. There can be a shower or thunderstorm in spots in the afternoon with a high of 83 at the coast, 87 inland. Still warm and humid Friday with intervals of clouds and sunshine, high again 83 at the coast, 87 inland. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Friends, countrymen, tourists, and Ocalans, lend me your ears. Hey, speaking of ears, there is an opportunity for you to help feed and provide good maintenance, housing, and medical care for Marion County's rescued big cats, bears, monkeys, and other disabled or unreleasable wild and exotic animals. Take a tour on Wednesdays or Saturdays of the Endangered Animal Rescue Sanctuary. Call 352-266-2859. The Endangered Animal Rescue Sanctuary is affectionately known as EARS. 'Tis the season to be merry at the Appleton Museum of Art's annual Family Day, Saturday, December 1st from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. Celebrate the Urban Family Holiday Exhibit with decorated trees, the beloved